morning, and so I think we're just going to go ahead and get started, everybody. Hey, everybody, my name is Ashley Jones. I'm the Managing Director of Community Programs. You can't see me right now. We are having a little bit of a technical difficulty, so everyone with the exception of our guest today is muted and hidden from view, but we're all here and joining in. We've got a very timely webinar for you today, how to write a killer resume. We've got Shannon Gwinn here to give us some tools and tricks and tips to craft a resume that'll help you stand out amongst the crowd. And so, you know, whether you've graduated and are entering the workforce for the first time, or you find yourself having to dust off your resume and make some additions and tweaks, there's something here for everyone. I do want to give a big thank you to our sponsors, Wright Lindsay Jennings, Frost, and the Little Rock Chamber for their continued support with all of our programs. And then I'll give a brief introduction of Shannon, and then I'll pass it over to her and she can share her screen. Shannon Gwinn is the Director of Student and Career Services for the College of Business at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. She provides career development and placement support to students to help them identify viable career options and goals. Career-related concerns such as finding employment and using your degree for your future career are addressed. Shannon earned a Master of Business Administration and a Bachelor of Business Administration and Marketing from the College of Business at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. Thanks for being with us today, Shannon. I'll pass it over to you and you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, thank you. I was really excited to get to join you today. And let's see, make sure I'm doing this right. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So let's, as Ashley said, how timely is this? It's time to dust off your resume, but I would suggest right now, a good idea is pick a date. Pick some type of date that means something to you that you'll remember, stick it in your phone, and make that an anniversary date that you tell yourself, whether you're thrilled and happy in your current position and you have no plans to leave, or you're miserable, but at least once a year, you're going to open that document, you know, dust the cobwebs off and review your resume. Something may have changed between then and now that you want to make sure you have it current. I hear this a lot in my job. A company will call and say, hey, I've got a great opportunity. Who do you have? Have some students send me their resumes. And a lot of times what I hear is, oh, I'm working on this big deadline, or I've got a project that's due, or let me get it to you this weekend. Well, employers have moved on. They are needing someone and they want it yesterday, not when you get around to it. So make that an important date for yourself. But let's go ahead and get started. Y'all like my toolbox here? This is, I want you to imagine that you have a toolbox for job hunting. And what are the tools that you need to put in that toolbox? And one of them is your resume. And that's going to help you find your treasure. What's your treasure? Of course, a fabulous paycheck, benefits, an exciting career opportunity. Maybe it's not a lucrative position, but maybe it's something that you're passionate about and you're excited about and you want to pursue. So think about your resume as just one part of what's in your toolbox. So for the purpose of your resume, why have a resume? A lot of times I hear people say, oh, you know, the best jobs I've gotten have been just word of mouth. I really didn't need a resume. Well, as you have seen, the economy can turn on a dime and you need to be prepared. You may be going where, a few months ago, no one was applying for a position. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to be competing with 100 other people. So the purpose of your resume is to make that employer interested that they want to interview you. And think about it as hiring a public relations agency. You want a PR firm speaks on your behalf. Well, your resume serves that purpose as well. You want your resume to be speaking on your behalf. And what is the message that you're trying to send? So for the purpose of our discussion today, I broke down the segments of a resume. So let's get started with your heading. Believe it or not, I've seen a few resumes that didn't have their name on it. Really? I'm supposed to guess who this is? But you definitely want to put your name on it. It doesn't need to be a billboard, but it does need to be prominent and show up. The next bullet here is address. Now, I have address, but with a big question mark by it. Employers don't use snail mail anymore, the U.S. Postal Service. So I don't think it's necessary that you put your actual physical mailing address, but you definitely want to include your phone number, and you definitely want to include your email address. Now, a couple of comments on those two things. Your phone number. Numbers can be easily transposed, and you've heard the saying, you've written it so you don't see it. Have someone check it, double check it, triple check it, call that number and make sure that is your phone number. If an employer is trying to reach you to schedule an interview and you've put an incorrect number down, that may be a good reason for your resume to go in the trash. Your email address. It needs to be a professional email address. And you want to stay away from polarizing. If you're the number one Tiger fan, you don't need to put that in your email address, because that employer may not like the Tigers. And once again, you don't want them to have a reason to already be against you. So, make sure it's professional, like your name. I have seen hot nurse before. I've seen cutie patootie. I've seen number one hog fan. So I've seen a lot of variations of not appropriate email addresses. And same thing, check it. Make sure that is your correct email address. So lots of employers have told me they want to see your skills. And your skills should match the job description that you are hoping to obtain. So take a moment, review that job description, and see why am I applying? What is it that's really interests me that I feel like I could bring to the company? You need to stay away from things like hard worker. That's a relative statement, or people person. But actually put proficient in Excel or bilingual. True story. I could write a book about stories I've heard about people's resumes. True story, though. I had someone that put she was proficient in French. So I quizzed her on that. And her definition of being proficient was she could count to 10. No, that does not make you proficient in a foreign language. So we scratched that from her resume. But if you do have a special skill that you want to highlight, I use this phrase, hit them right here. You just want to punch them. Say, look, this is what I can bring to your organization. So, trick question. Which comes first? Do you put your education, or do you put your experience next? So, since we're all on mute, I can't hear your answers. But I will imagine that some of y'all are saying education and some of y'all are saying experience. And my answer is it depends. It just depends. So please don't walk away here and say that I said you must put education first, because it just depends. For our discussion, we will discuss education first. Include your degree. So, for example, when Ashley introduced me, she mentioned the Master of Business Administration degree and then Bachelor of Business Administration degree. That is how I list it. I list my highest degree first. So if you have a Bachelor of Business Administration degree or a Bachelor of Science degree, and that is the highest degree you have right now, put that on there. Then put your major and put the college you attended. If you're still going to college, then you may want to put expected graduation date. And if you have a competitive grade point average, you may want to include that. Some majors, it isn't as important as others, but there are some majors that are pretty competitive. Right now, the accounting field and information systems, those are pretty competitive, and they do want to see grade points and transcripts. So moving on to employment. Think about what you've done, or what are you doing? You want to start with your most recent first. So what positions have you had? But just because you've done it in your past doesn't mean it has to be included on your resume. You know, if you were a babysitter or a nanny, or you mowed lawns while you were in high school, you don't have to keep that on there. At some point, you do want to drop things off for a couple of reasons. One is, does it matter with where you want to go? And the second one is, it may make the employer question your age without having, you know, it's illegal for them to ask you how old you are. But if you have something that you did 20 years ago on your resume, they may try to figure out, oh, I wonder how old he is. You may have some volunteer opportunities or activities that you have participated in that qualify as a job. They may show your leadership ability, your planning, your executing. So you definitely would want to include those if applicable. So I have a rule in my office that I don't want to hear the word, there's a 4-letter word, can't use in my office, and that is just. J-U-S-T. And I do hear that. People say, oh, I'm just a bartender, or I'm just a retail clerk at the mall. No, you're not just that, because when I go, hopefully you'll be able to one day soon, but when I go to an establishment and I want to sit at the bar, I want the bartender to be able to take my order and take it accurately and process my financial transaction. So there are some key components to every position, and an employer is paying you and expecting you to perform those duties. So don't minimize any position that you may have or may have had in the past and think, oh, you know, that's not important. It may be. You may be able to transfer those skills to a future position. So I put a couple up here: custodial work or sales clerk. What goes into those types of positions? With the sales clerk, and when I mentioned a minute ago about processing financial transactions, I can make a financial transaction at a at a retail store really complicated. You know, I could have a return, I could have a coupon, I could have a gift card. I may not be able to pay for everything in one currency, so I may have to give you some cash and then put some on a credit card. I've just really muddied the waters there and probably maxed out the patience of a retail clerk. However, if that is your role, if that is your job responsibility, that you need to highlight that you can process financial transactions no matter how complicated they may be. So you can Google action words. If you like this list, I can provide it to Ashley and she can get it to you. But I use this sheet a lot when I am helping people with their resume. So one thing we don't use on a resume are the two words responsible for. So as I was visiting with Nora before the workshop started, I was having issues getting all my groceries from the Click It Pick Up list. I am responsible in my household. I am responsible for dinner. Okay, but I'm not going to, put that. However, doesn't it sound better when I say plan and prepare delicious and nutritious meals for my family? So think about that example, but with your work. You may be responsible for staffing, but where's the action? When you could put schedule and maintain staffing levels for the organization. Also think about sales. If you exceeded your sales goals, you might want to put sold more widgets in a quarter, whatever may apply to your industry. References. Sometimes people put references on their resume. However, make sure you pay attention if you are applying online and they ask for a separate document. Make sure then you separate it out. So the first question is, how many references are you going to list? The magic number is 3. It's not 2 and it's not 4. You should have 3 references. And who should you list? You may want to start with a former employer, a family friend, not a family member, not Aunt Susie. Aunt Susie loves you. You're her favorite, but she is not going to be objective when it comes to answering questions about you. So stick with maybe a favorite professor, faculty member, or a coworker, colleague that you've worked with for a while. But stick with professional references who can speak to your work ethic, to your integrity. Maybe they have examples of when you participated with a project or you were on a team. You do want to make sure you ask permission before you list them. And same when we were talking about your heading on your resume, check and double check, make sure their contact info is correct. Sometimes I see references on a resume and I know that reference is no longer at that company. Well, that tells me something about how current your resume is. If you haven't reached out to that person and know, if I know that they're no longer at the company, but you don't, and you have them as a reference. So make sure your contact info is current. So just some general tips. Don't go crazy with your margins. Make it a normal size, and then build your resume and then see what looks good. I tell people to pick a font and marry it, okay? Make a commitment. Stay consistent with your font throughout your resume. You may use bold, but just use it sparingly. After a while, you don't see it if you have it all over. We talked about short phrases, or we talked about action words. Think short phrases. This is not the time to use your proper grammar skills, and make sure you have subject-verb agreement. Start with your action words. And back to my toolbox at the very beginning, now is the time to make sure you have invested in some good quality resume paper. You can find some online and order it and have it shipped to your house. It is typically more expensive than just buying and you're not going to buy a ream of resume paper. But if I am actually applying and I am uploading my resume, yeah, the company already has your resume, but if they call you, and one day soon, hopefully, we will have face-to-face interviews, but when they call you, you need to have that ready, that you can print out a nice resume and have that to give to them when you go to the interview. Some companies do scan resumes, so just be aware. Avoid boxing everything in. Don't use like diamonds or arrows or things like that on your resume that might come across as junk. And just stick with aligning everything to the left. So here's just a quick little list of my pet peeves, what I see a lot. People use I on their resume. It is understood that the resume is about you, so you don't use the word I. We've already covered responsible for. Make sure if you use a word like pursuing, it is spelled correctly. I do see pursing and perusing a lot. There's a lot of mangers out there. So make sure that if you have the word manager on your resume somewhere, it is spelled correctly. Spell check isn't going to catch these. So just make sure. It's performed, not preformed. And your tense needs to match. If it is your current job, you are employed there now, use present tense. If it's your previous job, you no longer work there, make sure you're using past tense to describe what you're doing, but make it match. So just to touch on a few things about the cover letter, I am very intimidated by a blank sheet of paper. Okay, I will be honest with you. If you say, hey, write me a letter, what do you want me to say? So a cover letter could be intimidating for some people. But if you break it down and you say, I just need 3 paragraphs, and this is what it needs to cover, and think back to your resume. What do you want to highlight? Or maybe there's something that's not included on your resume that you want to make sure that information is transmitted to the employer. So highlight that. A lot of times I work with people who they are working full-time while they're earning a degree, or they're a student athlete while they are going to school and they have an exceptional grade point. I want to make sure that that information is translated to the employer, that they understand that, maybe it took me longer than 4 years to get my degree, but, I had to fund it completely by myself, or I went only at night when I got off work. And then the last paragraph is, wrap it up, put a bow on it, and ask for the sale, okay? I look forward to meeting with you to further discuss my qualifications and your position. So ask for it. Just a few more tips on your cover letter. Back to getting married to a font. Stick with that font. Grab that heading off of your resume that has your name and your phone number and your email address, and make sure that that's going to be your letterhead. Customize it. Be very specific about include the position and the company name. But check, double check, triple check. Make sure when you write a letter to Regions Bank and you are really excited about that opportunity, that first paragraph doesn't say, Bank of America on there. So when you customize it, make sure you've got the company name all throughout. Personalize it. Find out who the hiring manager is. Nobody likes to get a letter to whom it may concern or occupant. So pick up the phone or look on the website if you are not sure, but ask who either the human resource director is or who is the hiring manager for that position. And most of the time you should be able to find out that information. Okay, I thought I would give you a couple of funnies. And this one. Okay, so if we could, Ashley, is it possible? Do we have a way? Can we ask questions or give me some feedback?
Absolutely, and we've got plenty of time left to pose questions, and I feel like people might find this valuable as well. So anybody that has a question, feel free to unmute yourself, unhide yourself if you feel so inclined, and then feel free to ask a question either via video chat or use the chat box, and I can ask the question for you. I think the question did come up about gap employment. What do you do when you've been out of work for a period of time? And this may be, lead into a potential interview question as well. How do you handle the gap piece of employment?
Great question. So, the first thing you need to be prepared to answer is, why was there a gap? Was there a gap because of the Great Recession that we experienced back in around 2008? Or was there a gap in employment because you were in school? Or because of the pandemic? If I'm looking at a resume and I see, like a 2-year gap there, you need to be able to explain it. You also don't need to shy away from the reason. Maybe, you were in the military but maybe that wasn't for you. But you could put on there, just explain it, that unemployed for these 2 years because of education, or just be prepared to answer that. Sometimes I make kind of stereotypical statements. So if this doesn't apply to you, I'm not saying this is all just for women or all for men, but typically men have a ladder that they climb. And when they change jobs, it's because of different title, increase in money, and they go up the ladder. Women do that too. But sometimes women's ladder looks more like a roller coaster, right? And why could that be? Maybe they're moving up, they're working up the ladder, and then they decide they want to step back for a few years because maybe they want to start a family, or maybe there are family obligations and they find it difficult. So maybe they step back, and it may look like they've taken a lesser job, maybe not as much responsibility as what they had before. And then they start back up and they start moving back up the ladder. You may see another dip, like a roller coaster. It could be because later in the career, maybe they choose to take care of aging parents, or there's other health issues involved that they may step back. And men do this as well, but just be prepared to explain without giving too much information. You don't want to go in there and say, well, I had 2 kids and then I got divorced. I mean, you've just broken all the employment rules, okay? So don't do that. But you could explain it that was best for me in my life at that time, and leave it at that. But be prepared. Make sure you have an explanation of why there is a gap. That I was pursuing my education at that time, or, during the Great Recession, I was having difficulty finding work. However, I used that time to do what?
That's great. I think we had a few people with that question. Another question that's coming in quite a bit is, how long are most resumes? Should they stick to a page? Is it okay to have 2?
Great question. It depends. Typically, if you are relatively new in your career, you need to stick with 1 page. You have worked a long time on that document, and you have spent hours perfecting it, and you are so proud of it. And that employer is going to spend maybe 10 to 12 seconds reviewing all the work you've done. So when you have a page 2, just think that page 2 is buried. That what is going to make me actually read page 2 of your resume? So, the other day I was reading, it was a fabulous resume for someone who's been a hairstylist and even a salon owner, but she's pursuing a career in accounting. And her education was on page 2. So I encouraged her to swap that. Make sure your education, if you're going to have a 2-page resume, make sure that where you want to go is going to be on that first page. But typically, most people early in their career, a 1 page is sufficient.
All right. And another couple of questions that have been coming in. Thoughts on a graphic resume? You touched on this a little bit, but this person is seeing a lot of Gen Y and younger people designing graphic resumes. What are your thoughts on that? And does it, I bet it depends a lot on the audience, who you're speaking to, what type the job is. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Okay, I am not a fan of those. However, if that is your career, if you are looking for a more creative type position in graphics or creative design, then yes, you may want to highlight your creative skills. But no, and you don't want your picture on your resume either. So I am not a fan of those. I am not a fan of templates. I think you can find a template that you like and then make your own. Sometimes a template will tell you that you need to fit in this box, but really you need a box this big, and or vice versa. It's giving you a box this big, but you only have this much information, so then it looks funny. That's just me personally. I don't like templates, and I can pick them out pretty quick, but I'm not a fan of the graphic resume either, unless that is where you're going. You need to show your creative side.
Good information there. Another person brought up video resumes. Some employers, it looks like, are recommending a prepared 1 to 2 video presentation on who they are, their strengths, weaknesses, that sort of thing. Can you address that at all? Do you see that?
What I see is an elevator pitch. Okay, give me that 30-second, who are you? And it does not mean I was born as a baby. Okay, tell me in just short and sweet, what makes you special. That, basically give me 3 or 4 highlights off of your resume. Practice, practice, practice. I am all about cheesiness. So I tell students and alums, go into the bathroom and practice in the mirror, drive around, in your car and practice and practice and practice. Is not a word that you want to include in a video resume, but just give me your elevator pitch. Tell me who you are, what you're doing, and what you want to bring to the table.
We've got another question, shifting gears a little bit, on changing careers and the fields of that career entirely. How do you address that in a cover letter? And how do you make your resume more appropriate in a new career field?
Well, I can speak from experience with that. I had a long career in fundraising. And so part of my resume looks like, I'm wanting a job in fundraising. However, what I did was use the ability to connect with people, to build relationships, and turn that into why I think I could apply that to career services. I already had a lot of those business connections, so that was an easy transfer for me. Back to the example I used of the person that I was speaking with earlier that owns a hair salon. Why would you go from owning your own salon to wanting to be a public accountant? But that was her passion. And so her resume does look different because it has a career of service, but that is a good transition for her because she does know about establishing relationships, building a client base, and running a business. So she felt like those skills will apply to being an accountant. We have a joke about accountants that what's an accountant called with a personality is called partner. So accountants don't just build a shop and say, okay, come find me and let me help you. They actually have to go out and establish relationships. They have to build their client base. That's what she has done for years as a hairstylist. So look at what skills do you currently have, or what responsibilities are you currently doing that even though you think one doesn't have anything to do with the other, it probably does. So just make sure you highlight that and profile that.
Another question is about LinkedIn. How important is LinkedIn? How often should you update? And should you maybe include your handle on your resume?
Yes. How important. There is a book. In fact, I'm propping up my laptop with it. It is called Never Eat Alone, and I use it in a class that I teach at UALR, and it is all about networking. But the author says LinkedIn is the holy grail. Okay, so yes, you need to have a LinkedIn profile. You need to have a current photo on your LinkedIn account, and it does not need to include your seatbelt. I don't know why. If you spend any time on LinkedIn, there's a lot of seatbelts. People are taking pictures. I guess they're on their way to a job interview and they think they look good, so they shoot a selfie. But LinkedIn is very important. You should always have it current. It's not a use it or lose it, but it's so easy. I think you can get on there for a couple of minutes and network, connect with people, and you need to do this yesterday. And especially now that we are quarantined pretty much, how are you networking? I'm used to going to lunches or events and meeting people, and that's been shut down for me. But I can get on LinkedIn and reach out to folks and connect with them and start talking about what can we plan for the future when we open up. So yes, I think LinkedIn is very important, and take your resume when you're building your LinkedIn profile, or make sure that your resume mirrors your profile. You can also include your resume so that they can an employer could look at your resume through there. But you'll be amazed at how it grows once you start using it, and how fast you can build your network. I do know there's a couple of companies that come to campus and recruit, and they want to see your profile before they look at your resume. And they don't necessarily want to see that you have 5,000 connections, but if you've got 5 connections, it says, oh yeah, either they just built their profile or they're not utilizing it correctly.
Another question that's come up, Shannon, is following up after you've submitted your resume. Is that good, bad, maybe the timeline to do that?
After you've submitted your resume to follow up. It depends on the company. A lot of times, some organizations, the job has to close. The posting has to close before they even start filtering through resumes. So make sure you're paying attention to that. But yes, I think it is appropriate after a certain amount of time, and longer than 24 hours, of course. But if you have not heard back from a company in a certain amount of time, maybe a week, then it is, I think it is definitely appropriate. I would also suggest, if you are on the market and you are actively searching for a position, now is the time to build. I mean, you could make it as complicated or as extensive as you would like, but build an Excel spreadsheet or just get a notebook, but track where you've applied, what position, when did you apply, and then you'll be able to say, oh, I haven't heard from them yet. Yeah, now's probably a time to follow up, because you may forget. If you're looking and then I send you a job lead, then it may not register with you. Oh, I applied for that last week. But if you've got this diary, if you will, or just an application log of where am I applying? And if you're in a position where you are actively looking for a job and you're not working right now, that has become your job. So you need to set a schedule of, where am I going to look? There are some leads on sites like Indeed and Monster, but most of the time you're going to find better connections with places like LinkedIn or other connections you have that may be able to give you references. Did I answer the question, Ashley? I think I kind of got.
No, I think you did. Absolutely. I think, yes, it is appropriate to follow up, but make sure you've read maybe the fine print that says they won't make a determination for a certain amount of time, because it threads the line of being a little too desperate versus being, pertinent and following up on that. We had something else come in about references. What is the ideal mix of references? Who should you be looking to be that reference? And then do you notify them beforehand that they will be a reference?
Okay, so the first part of that is an appropriate mix. So I would say be industry specific. If you have a colleague or a coworker or someone that you used to work with that knows you in that capacity, then you definitely want to use that person. If you're wanting to use maybe a former supervisor, I would steer clear of current supervisor unless that is an established discussion and understanding that they already know that you are looking and that they would be a reference for you. But you could use a former supervisor, former faculty member, family friend, but I would mix it up, and I would also mix up, don't make it all from the same organization, because then that's all that employer would be able to see is how, what questions would they ask one reference over the other if it was all at the same place. So make sure it's a mix of how you know them and from where. And yes, you definitely want to communicate with your reference that I am looking. A lot of times your reference may ask you, well, tell me more about the job, or could you send me the job description that you've applied for so that I could speak more specific to your strengths with what they're looking for, with what's being advertised. So, but yes, definitely tell them that you're on the market.
I think that's a really good point, that if they're aware and they know you're looking, they have time to address the job description and speak to those points. I've actually been caught off guard by someone calling me for a reference, and I know if I'd had the chance to prepare better, I could have. I did a good job. They did wind up getting the job, but had I been more prepared, I could have spoken to those specific points.
Exactly.
Shannon, these have been really good points that have been made, and awesome questions coming from our participants. I don't see any new questions coming through, so I think we answered them all.
All right.
And I know we want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a meeting right after this. So huge thank you to you, Shannon, for taking the time. It's not ideal to have everyone hidden and on mute. But like I said, we were having some technical difficulties, and we're appreciative of you being able to answer these questions and share your knowledge on this subject, especially with everything going on. It's a very timely topic to discuss. Huge thank you to our participants, our awesome sponsors, Wright Lindsay Jennings, Frost, the Little Rock Regional Chamber. We have several other programs coming up at the Venture Center. So I encourage everyone to check out our Facebook page, our website, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll keep you informed on the programs we have. Did you have something else, Shannon?
Well, I just want to remind everyone who's listening, if you need that action word cheat sheet, or if you need an example of a cover letter, if you'll just reach out to Ashley, I can provide that information and she can get it to you, or my email is up here on the screen right now, so you can feel free to shoot me an email as well, and I'll be happy to help you.
Perfect. With that, I think we will go ahead and end it. Thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you.